Hi everyone, today we're doing the case of Dorothy Jane Scott, the case that scarred you.
Did when I was a kid, I watched a documentary on this case when I was a kid, and it scarred me for a long time. And I was too scared to. I remember being a kid, and if I'd answer the phone, it was always like a bit scary, just in
Uh-huh.
case. Well, you'll see why.
Yeah.
But yeah, this case has like stuck with me for a long time.
Yeah, it's a case that made you, that made
Yeah, I think so.
Disturbing who he is.
Yeah. So this case takes place on the 6th of August, 1984. It's Monday morning in Anaheim, California. The sun's barely up, and an employee is out with his crew getting ready to lay some telephone lines. The job site sits on a patch of dry bushland with the Riverside Freeway buzzing in the distance. The employees are in good spirits, cracking jokes to keep the crew awake, and one of them shouts out, "Watch out for dead bodies," but minutes later, the laughter dies, because there is, in the dirt, a human skeleton. The bones are laying alongside what's left of a dog, as if the two had met their fate together. The scene was grim. The remains of this person were scattered across a 25-foot radius, which means that likely animals had dragged this person around over time. And the remains were also charred, but not from murder. A bushfire had happened in fall of 1982. As the year was 1984, this had led investigators to believe that this skeleton must have been murdered around 2 years before. Heartbreakingly, the police could only recover 2 femurs, a complete skull, a pelvis, an arm, and the dog's bones. Thankfully, the skull was fully intact and the teeth were still in place. Some of the teeth even glistened with old fillings that were still in there. Despite having been burnt from the bushfire, all of the bones were bleached ghost white under the Californian sun. Along the items found at the skeletal site was a turquoise ring and a watch which had stopped at 12:30 a.m. on the 29th of May, 1980. What's really strange is there were housing tracks surrounding the site, and a major road runs just 30 feet away, but somehow, for more than 2 years, no one had noticed the bones lying there. Orange County police arrived and initially assumed that this person had been out hiking with their dog when something went horribly wrong. So ambiguous were the circumstances of their death that the official cause of death was categorized as questionable. The presence of the dog led the media to speculate a few things once the news broke. A satanic cult had killed this woman. B. The dog's body was placed there to mask the scent of the body. C. The dog's remains were placed there to confuse any person who came across the body's remains and make them think that actually the dog was buried there. Or D. The murderer or murderers brought a dead dog with them in case someone came by while they were digging and they could just tell these people, "Oh, we're burying our dog," which would avoid suspicion. An anthropologist from Cal State Fullerton University was called in to help figure out who this person might have been. As it turned out, these bones belonged to someone the police had been looking for a long time. Years, in fact. A 32-year-old mother named Dorothy Jane Scott.
Dorothy was a 32-year-old single mum to her 4-year-old son. Everyone who knew her described her as loving, generous, and grounded. She didn't date much, didn't party, didn't chase thrills. She was happiest at home with her son, surrounded by her family. Sean was only 4 years old when his mother was taken from him, so his memories are mostly shaped by what he'd been told. What he does know is that she was loving and selfless, the kind of mum who made her own clothes out of old curtains so she could spend her money on what her son needed instead. In addition to being recently divorced, Dorothy was bisexual, but doesn't seem to have been actively pursuing relationships, male or female, at the time of her abduction. She lived in Stanton with her aunt, just a short drive from Anaheim where her parents lived, and where she worked as a secretary for 2 quirky little businesses, one called Swingers Psych Shop and the other one's called Custom John's Head Shop. Her dad, Sean Scott, used to own Swingers before selling it, but he still hung around as the handyman. Everyone at work knew him, and everyone, of course, knew Dorothy too. And so did someone else. So the phone call started in early 1980. Now, as many of you know, 1980 predates the readily available mobile phones that we know today, so the phone calls were pretty much exclusive to landlines. So Dorothy's landline would ring. She would walk to the wall that it was fixed to, lift the phone off the receiver and press the phone piece to her ear. A voice that she recognized but couldn't place would tell her things. This wasn't just some random prank call, as his calls were consistent and highly invasive. The stalker would recount extremely intimate information about her daily routine, suggesting he'd been observing her religiously. At times, his voice was oozing affection and admiration, whilst other times he was vindictive and angry. The stalking then began to take a dark turn. Phone calls turned to disturbing displays of affection. Once, the stalker left a single dead rose on her car windshield while she was at work. Following the dead rose on her windshield, she received a blood-curdling phone call. He said, "Okay, now you are going to come my way, and when I get you alone, I will cut you up into bits so no one will ever find you." So harrowing were these calls that one co-worker even reported that Dorothy had moved 3 times between October 1979 and May 1980. The stalker seemed to be very aware of her schedule, where she would be, when, and even what she was wearing on a certain day. Dorothy never reported the calls to the police, but instead confided in her mother and some of her co-workers. She thought about getting a gun, but decided on karate classes instead. Unfortunately for Dorothy, those karate classes were going to be put to the test.
The 27th of May 1980 started like any other. On this day, Dorothy took her son to work with her just for a quick work meeting. But during the meeting, she noticed that one of her co-workers, Conrad, wasn't looking so good. His hand was swollen from a spider bite, and it appeared to be from a black widow spider. Dorothy and another co-worker, Pam, offered to drive Conrad to the hospital in Dorothy's white 73 Toyota station wagon. Before heading to the hospital, Dorothy made a brief stop at her parents' house to let them know the change in the plan. Her parents, Jake and Vera Scott, were more than happy to keep their grandson, while Dorothy did what she did best, help other people. While at the house, Dorothy's mother convinced her to change out of a black scarf and swap it for a thicker, warmer red scarf, something that would be relevant later on in the case. It was in Maine, California, and it could get quite cold at night. So Dorothy leaves her son in the care of the grandparents, all whilst wearing a new red scarf. At the hospital, Conrad was treated while Dorothy and Pam sat waiting in the area flipping through magazines and watching the TV. When Conrad was discharged at around 11 p.m, he and Pam headed to the pharmacy to pick up his prescription. So Dorothy tells them that she's going to go grab the car and that once they're done picking up the prescription, to come meet them at the front of the hospital so Conrad wouldn't have to walk. But this would be the last time that Dorothy was ever seen again alive. So Pam and Conrad got the prescription and they walked out of the front of the hospital just like Dorothy had told them to do. But as Pam and Conrad waited outside, they saw Dorothy's car suddenly speeding towards them with the high beams blazing so brightly that they couldn't actually see who was behind the wheel. The car didn't slow down, didn't stop, didn't roll down a window. It just shot straight past onto the road and disappeared into the night. Conrad and Pam just figured that maybe there was an emergency with her son and that she desperately needed to leave. The hospital security also didn't seem too concerned, so the two just waited for an hour, and then 2 hours, but Dorothy didn't come back. Now, Dorothy's father used to own the shop where they all used to work at together, so they all had his phone number readily available to use. It was at this point that Pam and Conrad finally called Dorothy's parents to check in on Dorothy, and it's at this point that the truth had set in. She hadn't been home, she hadn't called, and she hadn't been seen since she left that car park. Chills went through Pam that moment when she found out that Dorothy hadn't returned home. She had a terrible feeling, so she immediately called the police to alert them about what had just happened. So the police came out to check the scene where the car had been parked. Cigarettes and a box of tissues were found on the ground. Dorothy didn't smoke, so the chances of the cigarettes belonging to her were unlikely on its own, and the evidence didn't constitute proof of any foul play. And so, the police just brushed it off until things became apparent that something truly terrible had happened.
About 4 hours later, around 4:30 a.m., a resident called the police to report smoke in an alleyway. Dorothy's car was found in an alley 10 miles from the hospital, engulfed in flames. There was no sign of Dorothy or anyone else. Sergeant Bob Taft, the current cold case investigator assigned to Dorothy's case, said that it was evident that whoever left the vehicle there was in a hurry. The headlights were still on and the driver's side door was open. A gas canister was found in the trunk of Dorothy's car, and it was determined that an accelerant had been put on the passenger side of the car. The outer front of the car was left pretty much intact, but the interior of the car was completely destroyed. So reading that, you would think that she was probably in the passenger seat. Oh no, would if he had been in the passenger seat if the accelerant was poured all over the passenger seat? He's obviously trying to eliminate any evidence of her and him, or just him. Well, either way, and the interior was completely destroyed. Jacob Scott and Dorothy's brother, Jim Scott, went together to look at the remains of Dorothy's car. Jim, the brother, said that it was heart-wrenching and so hard to see her vehicle completely destroyed like that. After her car was found on fire, that's when an official investigation into Dorothy's disappearance was launched. Initially, the investigators decided to keep the case quiet as they were trying to deter the public finding out about her disappearance and either interfering with the investigation or taunting the family. However, it was only a week later when the nightmare only deepened for the family. Dorothy's mother, Vera, picked up the phone to hear a man's voice on the other end. He says, "Are you related to Dorothy Scott?" "Yes," Vera replies. And he says, "I have her." Click. The call disconnects. It was a stalker. Unfortunately, this wasn't an isolated incident, but the beginning of a torturous pattern. The stalker began his disturbing taunts, and his phone calls would progressively get worse, telling Vera, "I killed her," before quickly hanging up. It was after this initial call that the Scotts told the police everything. The phone calls, the threats, the creepy gifts. Weeks passed with no sign of Dorothy. Out of desperation, Vera and her husband, Jacob, went to the local paper offering $25,000 for any information that could bring her home, which was obviously a lot of money in 1980s. The police wiretapped the Scotts' residence and have the recordings of the stalker's voice, and it's been described as gruff, but obviously plainly disguised. Despite this, a trace couldn't be made as a stalker would never stay on the phone long enough. So he's got a really gruff voice, but he's intentionally making it anonymous, like obviously concealing his own voice. 2 weeks after Dorothy's disappearance, the editorial manager of a major newspaper that served the Orange County area got a call from a man who stated the following: "I killed her. I killed Dorothy Scott. She was my love. I caught her cheating with another man. She denied having someone else. I killed her." End quote. He wasn't bluffing. He knew details about that night the police hadn't released to the public. 2 details that he knew really stood out. Number 1, that there was a spider bite on Conrad's hand. And secondly, the red color of Dorothy's headscarf, the one she'd changed into before heading to the hospital. The caller also claimed Dorothy had called him from the hospital. Although it seems the rest of the call was authentic, this last part didn't add up. Pam, who had been glued to Dorothy's side all evening, swore she never saw her make a call. The only moment Dorothy was alone was when she went to the bathroom before retrieving the car. Furthermore, remember, this is 1980, so you don't have any cell phones. Dorothy would have had to call him at his house, which wouldn't have given him enough time to then get to the hospital. More likely, this was his twisted fantasy reshaping the truth to make it seem that she betrayed him in his mind. Super eerie and creepy. This idea that he thinks that they're in like some relationship or something.
That's a really common thing with stalkers, isn't it?
Yeah.
Terrifying.
Yeah.
Unfortunately for Dorothy's parents, there was no further progress on the case. The police were unable to identify who this stalker was and, well, not just a stalker now, her killer. The calls kept coming, and it was always when Vera, Dorothy's mum, was home alone. Typically every Wednesday afternoon, and this happened for years. So the police tapped the line hoping to trace him, but the killer never stayed on the phone long enough for this to happen. Then once, Dorothy's father Jacob came home unexpectedly and he answered. After a brief exchange, the killer put the phone down, and just like that, the call stopped. It was then on the 6th of August 1984 when Dorothy's skeleton was found. The watch, which was found near the skeleton, had stopped at 12:30 a.m. on the 29th of May 1980. Eerily, we know this was about an hour after Dorothy's car was last seen by her co-workers. When Dorothy's remains were found, the phone rang again. The same man, the same mocking tone. He asked, "Is Dorothy home?" The killer then hung up before Vera could even reply. The Scotts never changed their number, clinging to the hope that maybe, just maybe, the killer would call back again and stay on the phone just long enough for the police to be able to trace where the call was coming from. However, sadly, this never happened. The stalker has never been identified, and who killed Dorothy remains a mystery to this day. So now we arrive to the suspects. Dorothy wasn't someone with a long list of enemies. She didn't date much, she didn't go out at night. She spent her time between work, church, and home with her son. So, of course, the police didn't have much to go on people who wanted to harm Dorothy. However, there were some suspects who emerged in the case.
So the first one is her ex-partner. So this is often in any kind of case, you always look to the husband or the spouse first, especially the men. So the most obvious suspect would be the ex-partner. So Sean's father, Dennis Terry, was living in Fairgrove, Missouri at the time. Dorothy kept their relationship very private. For a period, she'd been touring with an all-girls band, and it seemed that during that time, while she was away from Anaheim, she entered into the relationship and later had Sean. When she eventually returned home back to Anaheim, she rarely spoke about the situation. Just a few days before the incident, Terry had come into town for a visit. During that time, he and Dorothy got into a heated argument. Terry wanted custody of Sean. His proposal was that since Dorothy had full custody for the past 4 years, he should now have full custody for the next 4 years. Dorothy flatly rejected the idea, which escalated into a serious confrontation between the two. So there, we have a motive. He wants to take the child for the next 4 years, and she's like, absolutely not. Given their recent custody dispute, investigators consider the possibility that obviously Dennis's anger and desire to gain custody for his son might have motivated him to remove Dorothy from the picture. Another factor fueling suspicion was that no screams or signs of a struggle were heard during Dorothy's abduction from the hospital, suggesting she may have known her abductor. However, no evidence ever tied Dennis to her disappearance. He maintained that he was on a 2-day bus trip to Missouri at the time, and he supported this with receipts. Multiple witnesses also recalled seeing him boarding and exiting the bus at his destination in Missouri. Reports further indicate that he phoned Dorothy's parents' house from Missouri on the day of the kidnapping, and later that same day spoke directly with her father, who informed him of what had happened. Taken together, these details make his involvement highly unlikely. So he's ruled out.
Yeah.
Most obvious, but he's ruled out.
In 2017, a true crime blogger spoke to Dorothy's son Sean, who had heard plenty of rumours of who might have taken his mother. One name in particular kept bubbling to the surface from friends of Dorothy who lived in Missouri: Mike Butler. Butler was an unstable individual who lived in the mountains, and allegedly it was involved in cult activity. If that's true, it makes the discovery of the dead dog alongside Dorothy's body a little harder to brush off as coincidence. So Butler worked at an auto body repair shop across the street from where Dorothy worked, and most disturbingly, Butler was allegedly obsessed with Dorothy. And not only this, his sister worked at the swingers' psych shop. That little connection could point to how the stalker seemed to know Dorothy's schedule so well. Dorothy and Mike were friendly, but there was never any kind of romantic relationship between them. Still, Mike seemed to have developed a fixation on her. He even told the police during questioning after her disappearance that he wanted to marry her, a startling thing to say about a woman who was missing to the investigators. Now, because he worked across the shop, this could explain how he knew so much about her daily routine and, of course, what she was wearing. Sergeant Taft later expressed interest in re-interviewing Mike in connection with the case, but that would no longer be possible, as Butler died in 2014. Now, Butler's sister has done quite well for herself since the tragedy, and she's a singer who performs locally in the area and is somewhat of a little local celebrity. The true crime blogger has tried multiple times to reach out to her over the years to speak about her brother. However, she's avoided this every single time. Law enforcement apparently knew about Butler back in 1980, but they never had any evidence to label him a formal suspect or a person of interest in the case of Dorothy Scott.
That would be the tough thing as a policeman. You might have a very strong, someone's involved, but if you don't have the evidence, you can't do anything about it.
It must be so frustrating.
But also that sister, she might think her brother's innocent, and even if she it's just a weird thing, like some random crime blogger being like, "Can I interview you about your brother who could be like a main suspect in some horrible tragedy?"
Yeah, I'd stay away from that. Yeah, leave me alone.
No, I don't want to reach out to you.
Yeah.
So that's understandable. That's not inherently suspicious.
No.
So the following hypothesis I found on Reddit. So this is what they posted. Quote, could the killer have been someone at this meeting and noticed Dorothy eyeing up her fellow employee? I understand most of us know that helping someone out of the opposite gender does not constitute cheating, unless maybe if you're a deranged psychopathic stalker killer with untreated psychological problems. But maybe the extra attention Dorothy was giving to this man caught him and it fueled his rage and anger. He could have easily overheard Dorothy asking Conrad if he's feeling okay and that she can take him to the hospital once the meeting is over or right away. And this could have given him reason to finally strike and murder her. Someone else then goes on to say that, quote, a lot of people say if it were a co-worker, she would have been filing paperwork with him daily or discussing the company's orders or inventory with him. What if it was just an employee who was a cleaner, maintenance worker, or someone who worked for the company remotely that needed to be a part of the meetings as company policy? And finally, one last, quote, I agree. Wasn't there a similar case where after years of receiving threatening calls and being stalked, it was a woman's husband the whole time? She also thought that the voice sounded vaguely familiar but still didn't realize it was her own husband. Not much of a stretch for someone to not recognize a co-worker's voice, especially if the co-worker was faking their voice a bit. So this has merit. It could have been someone in the workplace because remember when she picked up the phone, she said she recognized the voice but couldn't quite place it. So it's someone within her stratosphere, but she doesn't, it's not so close that you immediately know who it is. And as they were saying, when some people argue against it, it's like you would know if it's like someone you speak to every day. But what if it was like a random cleaner or someone in the fringes that they've heard of or spoke to lightly, but this person's secretly obsessed. They so happened to be at that meeting in some capacity, saw that she was being friendly with Conrad and gave him all this attention over his spider bite. And that's when he snapped.
Stalkers also make up things in their head. So if he was infatuated with her, he would have made up things like, oh, if she does this today, like if she opens her car in this way, that means she wants me. Because he's made it up in his own head.
Yeah.
There was like an Instagram stalker recently who was stalking a woman and he was like, she posted at 12, which is exactly what I was thinking about her today. So I know she's thinking about me too. And he's like, he just made it up in his head.
Yeah.
And she was like posting going, can you please leave me alone, please? And it's like, see, she's with a boyfriend and she didn't want him to know about it, but she wants me. And it's like, they just make it up.
Yeah.
They'll just make any little sign up. So, and
it's
then
if
all of a sudden he sees her with another guy. Oh, she's cheating on me.
Yeah.
All this time she's been with me, but now she's with, which could be like a very delusional snap.
Yeah. But considering the stalker knew her daily routine, he knew what she was wearing, like really intimate, like you have to be around someone frequently. Like I can't see someone just like in his little car, just like watching her. Like I feel like I think it's somehow related to the workplace.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I think that's what a lot of people think online as well when I've looked online.
Yeah.
Because I'm obsessed with this case. I think this is one of my cases that like I'm quite involved in. Like I like to look into, and I've seen a lot. So it's usually someone who works in the office.
Yeah.
Which,
go on.
No, it's all good.
I was going to say, even the previous suspect that we just spoke about, Mike Butler, his sister worked in the shop and he was across the street. But even then, there's still the sister working in there. Like it's something about the workplace for sure.
There's also another leading theory in this case, and that's the idea that Dorothy's boss was the killer. So Dorothy's boss was a man named John, and the facts pointing to this being a possibility include that, this is a big one, Dorothy's body was found on some property that John owned. Now, this wasn't like a residential area, was it? It was kind of like a hillside, right?
Yeah.
So it's not like his backyard. We're talking about somewhere a bit remote that he just owned that land, probably as an investment or something.
Still suspect.
Still very suspect, yeah. Also, outside of the meeting attendees, John was one of the very few people who knew exactly where she'd be. Dorothy also worked as a bookkeeper for both of his stores. Years later, John would be indicted on federal charges for tax evasion. That detail alone adds a whole new dimension to this story. The harassing phone calls only stopped after Dorothy's father answered the phone. The previous owner of John's shops was Jacob, someone who may have recognized his voice. Did the caller cut off all communication out of fear of being identified by her father? However, another blogger who goes by the name CrimeBlogger1983 has a very different take on Dorothy's abduction. He argues that this so-called stalker narrative was nothing more than a smokescreen. In his words, the calls weren't genuine obsession, they were staged. They served one purpose, to make the whole ordeal look like a crime of passion and throw investigators off the trail. But who benefits from this narrative, you might ask? If Dorothy was, in fact, cooking the books for John, or at least knew about his shady financial dealings, then eliminating her might have been more about self-preservation than obsession. By orchestrating the calls, he could have created an illusion of a dangerous stalker, which would have completely thrown the police off the trail.
The timing of Dorothy's abduction is also suspicious. It happened shortly after her ex-husband from Missouri came into town. So this blogger is saying that timing wasn't random. It was deliberate, and it was meant to cast suspicion on the ex, who was a very easy target, and shift the heat away from himself. In one of the more cryptic posts, this blogger even wrote, quote, "There are other reasons as to why I believe that John knows more, but I am not at liberty to say them at this time. Let's just say it's an extremely interesting lead. I can assure you there will be some additional details to come up in the future." So we'll have to see what this blogger progresses or what insider information he may have. But if John did kill Dorothy, it's possible he believed nature would hide his crime. That animals, weather, or time itself would ensure that she would never be found. What he didn't consider was gravity. The body eventually slid down the hill, edging closer to the road until discovery was inevitable. Fast forward to 1996, John is indicted on federal tax evasion charges, as we mentioned. That brings us back to the critical question. Did Dorothy, as his bookkeeper, stumble across something she wasn't supposed to see? If she realized the books didn't add up, she may have unknowingly signed her own death warrant.
So now, Cassie, it's time for you to share your theory.
Yeah, 100%. I don't believe... I like the theory from the crime blogger 1983, but I don't think it was staged. I think it was the boss, but he just had the hots for his 32-year-old employee who's recently single, who's like, you know, a vulnerable person. There probably also was the aspect of the fact that she was cooking his books. Maybe she did discover something, but you do not frame your own murder by calling every Wednesday afternoon.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And not just that, like leading up to her death and then for years after it, like he obviously is getting off on it.
Yeah, I think he was definitely infatuated with her. If it was this John guy,
yes,
allegedly,
whoever it was infatuated with her.
Yeah,
you don't leave a dead rose,
no,
or whatever it was on the wind, like the car.
It's just so risky calling as well because the police did trace you.
Yeah.
If you stayed on the phone for a little bit too long, much longer than you should have done.
Yeah.
And that's a really easy way to get caught. He obviously was so infatuated that you took risks.
Yeah.
I don't think you do that if you were just covering up a murder.
Exactly. But I mean, he literally was just there being like, you know, and he would say just like a one-liner.
Yeah.
And then like hang up. So there wasn't, but yeah, you're right. If you were like smart, you do the crime and then.
Yeah, you'd find other ways to cover your tracks.
For sure.
Yeah.
But he would just like store, like that is someone who has a loose.
I just thought about something too. If he killed her, if this John guy did kill her and he put her on his property, could be a way for him to return to the body as a little pilgrimage all the time as well. Because he knows where she is, knows she's buried on his property.
Yeah.
So that's like an airy thought too.
Yeah.
Because that's his land. It's like
God, even beyond the grave, he didn't leave that poor woman alone. To leave not the family alone either. Like what animal? He has to be some kind of control freak.
It's terrifying. This case is one of the most, I think it's one of the most terrifying cases. It scared me when I was younger anyway.
Yeah.
But I think it's one of the scariest cases.
For
The fact he was never
sure.
caught and the unknown and the mystery. To this day, we have no idea who did it. And likely, it's one of those things as well. It's one of those cases where likely, probably never will.
No, never.
Never.
I don't think it ever will. I mean, also the previous person her son, seems to think it was the Mike Butler guy.
Yeah.
I mean, that's interesting. But he's already dead. So even if it was that guy, he's died in 2014.
Yeah,
but he was apparently involved in cult activity. He said he wanted to marry her. And she was missing at that time and they were investigating her abduction. He's like, yeah, I plan on marrying her. And like apparently was obsessed with her. Like the signs, the red flags are there too.
It's if it's the MO of a kind of, or like the what do you call it? What do you call it? Profile. The profile of someone who was infatuated, obsessed.
I was thinking modus operandi.
Oh yeah, that's what I said at first. Yeah, but that's the case of Dorothy Jane Scott, which is a case which literally haunted me for a long time.
Yes. It scares me.
Terrified me.
After reading this, you get into it, and then you're right. I would pick up the phone, for like a microsecond, I'm just like, please not there be a scary voice. Like,
right.
I'm like, you know what it is? Like Scream. Remember that like horror movie where like he opens up like, hello,
what's your favorite movie?
Yes, like that's the terror of like picking up a phone and there being like a predator waiting to eat you. It's what it is.
Breathing down the phone.
And like I was saying, like, what can you do? She was like, yeah, I'm gonna take some karate classes, and like, what else do? You're just waiting.
Well, a lot of people said when I covered this case a while, like 5 or 6 years ago, people were saying she should have got a gun Fair enough, but I'm guessing she probably didn't think it was going to go this far,
No.
and she probably thought,
Probably
"Oh, some sort
less educated. Like now we know that stalkers can go like
can kill." Well,
yeah.
the fact is, that if people do start stalking,
Yeah.
they've already crossed the threshold, and now they're in a mental place in their
Yeah.
mind where they can actually kill now. So once someone
Yeah.
starts stalking you,
Yeah.
they've already crossed that line. They're actually capable of
Yeah.
murder now. So that's the thing to keep
So
in mind as
scary.
well. Terrifying. But yeah, that's the case of Dorothy Jane Scott. Thank you for sticking around if you made it this far. And don't forget to subscribe and also join. We've also done memberships too now as well. So if you wanted to join the memberships, please consider doing that. It will really help the channel. So thank you very much.
Thanks.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Big sigh. You all right, boy?
I did, Dorothy. You said
Oh, thank God. I thought it was fast.
Claudia.
Just nervous all the time.
Yeah.
Actually, those mobile phones in 1970 just weren't really available for people. I'm like, fuck off. So like, I was like, I'm gonna add that in because shit like that really bothers me when people comment the most annoying, obnoxious, like arrogant shit.
God, I have the loudest swallow.